Welcome to this deep dive, tailored specifically for you, the learner. We've got some really fascinating perspectives today, looking into something, well, pretty fundamental to being human. Our constant quest for knowledge, for understanding. You know those times when you learn something new and suddenly it sparks a whole cascade of new questions?
Oh, absolutely. Or that feeling of a problem you've only half solved,
Yeah.
just kind of lingering there in the back of your mind.
Exactly. It just sort of nudges you. So today we're going to explore why that happens. We'll be drawing on ideas from Gestalt psychology and philosophy, focusing on perception, how we see figures against a background, and, the patterns of our attention.
It's really about how we make sense of things, isn't it?
Yeah. And why this drive to know isn't just about collecting facts, but something deeper.
Well, consider this idea. Imagine consciousness like an infinite mirror maze.
Okay. A mirror maze.
Yeah, but these aren't just flat reflections. Each mirror shows you a slightly different reality.
Oh.
Maybe an alternative, a memory, a different angle, a possibility.
Interesting. So how does that connect to our minds when we're trying to figure things out? The learner might be wondering that.
Well, the principle is really in how consciousness works. Like the maze shows all these reflections, our perception is constantly grabbing, raw sensory data.
All the sights, sounds, everything.
Right. And it organizes that into meaningful patterns. But here's the crucial twist, I suppose. Our perceptual system, it's inherently incomplete, unlike a perfect mirror.
So it's selective. It doesn't capture everything.
Exactly. There are always gaps, bits missing.
Right.
And it's this incompleteness, this lack of the full picture, that actually drives us to fill in those blanks with our own interpretations, our own understanding.
So we're constantly connecting the dots based on the fragments we do get.
Okay, but, we live in this age of information overload, right? You'd think we'd be getting closer to, perfect knowledge.
You would think so.
But often it feels like the more we learn, the more uncertain, or maybe the more aware of the unknown we become. Why is that paradox there? That's a really key point. This abundance of information creates this fascinating situation. Because as one piece of knowledge comes into sharp focus, becomes the figure we're paying attention to,
Right.
well, then countless other unknowns sort of emerge from the background, things we didn't even realize were there.
Yeah.
And they start demanding attention too.
Can you give an example, for the learner listening?
Sure. Think about reading a book on a topic you're interested in. You finish it, but instead of feeling like, okay, done, you suddenly have a list of 10 more books or articles you feel you need to read.
Or watching a space documentary and suddenly you're asking questions about quantum physics or consciousness, things that weren't even on your radar before.
Precisely. It's like one answer just unlocks a whole new level of questioning. Our minds seem to function almost like hungry fractals.
Hungry fractals.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, they keep expanding outwards into new areas, but also deeper inwards into the details of what we thought we knew. It seems less about reaching a final point and more about maintaining this dynamic equilibrium, this constant process of sense-making.
So this ongoing quest, this curiosity, is it just about wanting more data, or is there something else driving it?
Well, think about the Gestalt concept of unfinished business.
Okay, I usually hear that in a therapy context.
Right, but it has broader implications for just core human cognition. Our brains seem to operate a bit like composers writing an endless symphony.
An endless symphony.
Yeah. Every time you finish a movement, arrive at some understanding, it doesn't just end. It naturally sets the stage, creates a kind of tension that calls for the next movement, the next piece of exploration.
How does that play out in, say, everyday learning?
Think about kids learning language. It's a great example. They learn a word, right? But they don't just stop there.
No, of course not.
That new word immediately opens doors to making sentences, understanding more complex ideas. It's this continuous cycle. Recognize a pattern, grasp it, and then immediately realize its limits, its incompleteness, because it points towards something more complex.
Ah, I see. It's never really done.
Exactly. It's almost like a Mobius strip,
Yeah.
Constantly looping back, creating these ongoing cycles of discovery, and then renewed questions.
That idea of layers, different levels of processing, you mentioned a double helix metaphor earlier, like DNA.
Yes, exactly. Imagine DNA structure for a moment. One strand could represent your conscious awareness, the stuff you're actively thinking about, the information you're processing right now.
Okay, the focused thoughts.
And the other strand, that symbolizes the huge, vast realm of unconscious processing. All those background associations, connections, feelings your mind is making constantly without you even directing it.
So how do those two strands connect in our, personal quest for knowledge? How does the learner experience this?
The rungs connecting them, those are the moments of insight, the aha moments.
Ah, when something just clicks.
Precisely. It's when a conscious thought suddenly links up with something your unconscious has been sort of mulling over. What you experience as reality is really this constant dance, this interplay between conscious analysis and unconscious association.
So when something catches my eye, becomes the figure.
Right. It triggers both things at once.
Mm.
Conscious thought goes to work on it, and your unconscious starts making connections. This creates a kind of, well, cognitive tension maybe, a need for resolution that pushes you towards deeper understanding.
So it's definitely not just linear, like stacking bricks of facts one by one.
Not at all. It's much more integrated, more dynamic. Your pursuit of knowledge really operates in the here and now of your experience. Each moment of understanding is sort of distinct, but it also subtly colors and influences all the other moments.
Like notes in a chord, maybe? Each has its own sound, but contributes to the overall harmony.
That's a great analogy. And it helps explain why, getting a new insight feels satisfying in the moment, but it often leaves you feeling like there's still more to uncover, more depth to explore.
It reminds me of zooming in on a digital photo. You increase the clarity in one spot.
And suddenly new details pop out in the areas around it, demanding you look closer there too. Exactly.
So this really challenges the old idea of learning as just like filling an empty cup, doesn't it?
It really does. What if the mind isn't a passive vessel at all, but a highly active organizer, constantly rearranging the pieces of experience to build new meanings, new connections?
You mentioned scientific revolutions earlier, Newton, Einstein. How do they fit this active organizer idea?
Well, think about Newton's laws or Einstein's relativity. Did they provide the final answers? Not really.
No, they opened up whole new fields.
Exactly. They fundamentally reshaped how we perceive the relationships between things like space, time, gravity. They changed the framework. It wasn't just adding facts. It was like changing the figure we were looking at, which in turn transformed the entire ground of our understanding.
Okay, so let's loop back to that mirror maze analogy. If it's not about finding the one exit,
Then the value must lie in exploring the reflections themselves. For you, the learner, each answer you find isn't an endpoint. It's more like it unveils a whole host of new perspectives, leading to a richer, more complex understanding.
the mirrors become portals, not walls.
Beautifully put. Your hunger for answers isn't really about reaching some static finish line. It's about maintaining this dynamic equilibrium, this balance within your own cognitive landscape. Like a tightrope walker, you need that constant movement, that ongoing exploration to stay upright, to keep growing intellectually.
Wow. That really shifts things. It makes my own tendency to constantly learn feel less like a hobby and more like, well, just how my mind works.
Exactly. It's fundamental. And this active engagement, it's driven by several key forces operating within that cognitive world, that psychological field we mentioned.
Right, the field idea, like an electromagnetic field, but for thoughts and understanding.
Kind of, yeah. And every unanswered question creates a ripple in that field, a disturbance seeking some kind of resolution. Learning isn't isolated, it reconfigures the entire landscape.
Can you give an example of that reconfiguration?
Sure. Imagine you learn one compelling fact about, say, climate change and its interconnected effects. That single fact doesn't just sit there alone.
No, it connects to other things.
Right. It can change how you see your own daily choices, economic news, even the weather outside your window. It acts like a catalyst, shifting things across your whole cognitive field. It's an isomorphic process. The structure of the knowledge affects the structure of your understanding.
Okay, so what are these fundamental forces driving this? What's the first one?
The first big one is an innate drive for wholeness. The mind just seems programmed to seek completeness. When you encounter fragmented information, like seeing just a few pieces of a puzzle.
You automatically try to picture the whole thing.
Exactly. It's the Gestalt law of pregnance, a tendency towards simplicity and completeness. Incomplete stories, half-understood ideas. They create these tension fields in the mind.
A kind of mental itch, like you said.
Precisely. A psychological imperative for closure. It makes us uncomfortable to leave things hanging.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second force?
The second relates to keeping that psychological field balanced. When new information comes in that conflicts with what you already believe or understand.
That dissonance we hear about, cognitive dissonance.
That's the one. It creates an imbalance, a kind of structural instability. It's not just intellectually puzzling, it can feel like a threat to your whole way of organizing reality.
So our minds try to resolve that conflict.
Actively. You'll either find a way to reject or discredit the conflicting information, or you'll have to restructure your existing framework to accommodate it and restore that sense of coherence, that equilibrium.
Which can be hard work.
It absolutely can be.
Yeah.
It often involves confronting deeply held assumptions.
Right. Okay, and the third force. You mentioned unfinished tasks earlier.
Yes, the compulsion of closure. This links to something called the Zeigarnik effect. Psychologists noticed waiters remembered orders better if they hadn't been paid yet. Unfinished tasks stick in the mind.
So unfinished learning does the same thing.
Exactly the same. A concept you don't quite grasp, a question you can't answer.
Mhm.
It creates what you could call an attentional gravity well.
It just keeps pulling your thoughts back to it.
Yes, even when you're trying to focus on something else. It demands resolution, sometimes overriding even practical needs, until you feel you've achieved some level of understanding or closure.
Okay, force number 4 was about figure ground, how our attention shifts. How does learning change that?
Learning doesn't just add new figures to focus on. Crucially, it changes the background against which those figures appear. Think about studying art history.
Okay. Before, maybe I just see a painting. Pretty colors, maybe a scene I recognize.
Right, but after you learn about different periods, styles, techniques, brushwork, when you look at that same painting again.
I see things I never noticed before. The composition, the influences, the context.
Exactly. New figures emerge from what was previously just undifferentiated ground. The entire perceptual landscape has been transformed by knowledge. You perceive more.
That's a powerful effect. And the fifth force?
The fifth is that deep human drive to find meaningful patterns. We're not content with just isolated facts. Our minds constantly search for the underlying structures, the connections, the rules that link things together.
At all levels, like small details up to big theories.
Yes, micro, meso, macro. We want to see how specific facts fit into broader concepts, how concepts form overarching frameworks.
It's getting at Kafka's idea, the whole is other than the sum of its parts. It's about the organization. It's the relationships between the pieces that create the meaning.
Precisely. And the pursuit of understanding is guided by seeking out these organizing principles.
So these 5 forces, wholeness, balance, closure, figure ground shifting, and pattern seeking, they all work together.
Absolutely. They form this incredibly dynamic, interdependent system. It's recursive. The drive for wholeness might reveal an imbalance, which creates tension needing closure, which shifts your figure ground perception, revealing new patterns to seek, and so on.
Wow. It mirrors the complexity of consciousness itself.
You could say it's isomorphic to it, yeah. Nested organizations, like atoms making molecules, making organisms. It explains why learning feels satisfying, yet always incomplete. It expands like a fractal, always revealing more complexity, but with consistent underlying structures.
It sounds like there's a kind of internal economy at play, too.
That's a good way to put it. A perceptual economy. We're constantly balancing things.
Yeah.
Simplicity versus complexity, stability versus the need for flexibility, the desire for completeness versus the necessity of staying open to new information.
And when an explanation just feels right.
It's often because it achieves a kind of optimal balance in that perceptual field for you at that moment. It brings coherence without being too simplistic, maybe.
Let's go back to the double helix idea. How does this ongoing process, driven by these forces, actually build our understanding over time?
Okay, so imagine the helix again. One strand is explicit knowledge, facts, theories. The other is implicit organization, the intuitive connections, the background structure.
And the insights are the rungs connecting them.
Right. Each insight, each aha moment, forged through wrestling with these forces, strengthens that connection. It reinforces the whole structure, like adding a run makes a ladder stronger. This allows for higher order thinking, more complex connections to form. It's like cognitive DNA replication, building a more sophisticated framework.
So each bit of learning changes our capacity for future learning.
Exactly. And it's recursive, remember. The cycle driven by those 5 forces doesn't just repeat, it spirals. Drive for wholeness, imbalance, tension, closure, shifts figure ground, reveals new patterns, restarts the drive for wholeness at a new level.
Which is why it feels like learning never truly ends.
Precisely. Each cycle establishes a new baseline, a new starting point for the next round of inquiry.
And the engine driving all this, you said it was curiosity.
Yes. From this Gestalt viewpoint, curiosity isn't just a personality trait. It's a fundamental field dynamic. It's what keeps the whole system energized, healthy, adaptable, like muscles needing exercise. Those 5 forces working together are the engine of curiosity, driving this self-sustaining cognitive evolution.
This really reframes the whole idea of seeking answers. Maybe the arrival point is, well, maybe it doesn't exist in the way we think.
That's a crucial point to wrestle with, for the learner especially. What if that destination, the answer, is partly an illusion? We tend to think linearly, ignorance via knowledge. But what if that's backward?
Reversed. How so?
Think about those big scientific shifts again. Newton, Einstein. Did their answers end inquiry?
No, quite the opposite. They opened Pandora's box in a way.
Exactly. They revealed deeper, more complex questions. Relativity didn't solve everything. It pointed towards the weirdness of quantum mechanics. Answers seem to transform inquiry, not terminate it.
So consciousness isn't a bucket being filled.
Not at all. It's a dynamic process of continuous reorganization. Every insight doesn't just fill a gap. It actually adds new dimensions to your mental landscape, like looking closer at a fractal, more detail, more complexity emerges, seemingly infinitely. The tension between known and unknown keeps consciousness vibrant, evolving. It resonates with Kurt Lewin's field theory, that idea of constantly evolving psychological states.
Which leads to a radical thought. Maybe the real value isn't in the answer, but in the questioning.
Precisely. Let's try that mirror reversal. What if the questions themselves structure the psychological field? What if uncertainty is the necessary ground for the figure of understanding to even appear?
So answers are just temporary ways to manage the tension.
Perhaps. Ways to maintain an optimal level of cognitive tension, not eliminate it. Think about it. Insight often comes after prolonged wrestling with uncertainty. Meaningful patterns emerge from the process of questioning, exploring, rearranging.
That has huge implications for how we think about learning and education, doesn't it?
It really does. Maybe the goal shouldn't just be filling gaps, but cultivating the art of asking better questions, of maintaining that productive state of inquiry.
Because if consciousness needs unanswered questions to thrive,
Then absolute certainty isn't enlightenment. It's, well, maybe cognitive stagnation. It makes you wonder if existence itself relies on unsolved mysteries.
wow.
And practically, understanding these field dynamics, figure ground shifts, the need for closure, it can help you manage your own learning more effectively. Focus on the process, embrace the tension.
It's like we're designed to have this love affair with mystery.
That's a wonderful way to put it. Answers become thresholds, invitations to go deeper, not final stops. Like great art, it doesn't give you one meaning. It evokes endless interpretations, endless questions. Meaningful knowledge does the same. It keeps opening doors.
It almost feels like knowledge exists in potential, like in quantum physics, until we engage it with a question.
That's a fascinating parallel. The idea that possibilities remain possibilities until an observer, or in this case an inquirer, interacts. Could it be that the universe itself organizes, responds, reveals patterns based on the questions we ask, the attention we focus? It suggests a very participatory reality.
So my individual questions don't just change me, they might ripple outwards.
It's a profound thought. Perhaps reality is recursive in that way. Individual inquiry reshapes personal understanding. Collective questioning shifts paradigms. And maybe, just maybe, consciousness engaging with mystery plays a role in how universal patterns unfold. Perception itself might evolve through this engagement.
This gives me so much to think about. It's not just about the aha moment of getting an answer.
But about the richness of the whole journey, the depth that the seeking brings. And Gestalt thinking offers tools for that journey. Awareness of your internal field, managing that creative tension, staying fluid in your thinking, cultivating insight through persistent questioning.
So maybe true wisdom isn't having all the answers.
Perhaps it's cultivating the art of asking the right questions, the deeper questions.
So as you, the learner, continue exploring, maybe consider that the real value isn't always in finding the definitive answer.
Right, but in the richness and depth that the act of seeking itself brings to your understanding.
Think about that unfinished business in your own mind, those questions that just won't leave you alone, that keep you curious.
Instead of seeing them just as gaps to fill, maybe they're the very engines driving your growth, expanding your awareness.
We hope this deep dive has offered maybe a new lens, a new perspective on your own quest for knowledge. What new questions popped up for you today?
What will you choose to explore next? The journey is always ongoing.
And the really fascinating discoveries, they're often waiting just beyond the edge of what we think we know right now.